So in today's video, I want to look at the expansion. It's going to be a pretty simple, short video, hopefully, that will show you what you're looking for and how a good expansion should look. In a separate video, I'll go over how you then do this, ways that you can improve your expansion, how you can train this, that kind of thing. But today I just want to show you what it should look like and some key things to begin with. So we're going to dive in. I've got the iPad here and some video, and I'm going to dive in and show you what it should look like. So before we look at the video, I should say what we want is basically we want the expansion to be as small as possible and for minimal movement of the rest of the body. So we basically want you to be able to get to a position at your real full draw where you then expand, and when you expand it should be almost imperceptible. So that's the first thing to whether or not your expansion is good. If you can't see it, if you can almost not notice it, that's good. If you can really visibly see your expansion happening, then that's not so good. So we want this tiny movement, and ideally we want to come to a point where there's only a tiny bit more of the arrow to pull through the clicker. Does that make sense? So if you have a centimetre to pull through the clicker, half a centimetre, something like that, that means your expansion is going to be a big amount. We want a really small amount. So 1 millimetre, 2 millimetres, and the more you work on it, the smaller that amount should get. So now let's look at an example of a good expansion. So I've got 3 different examples here in the same video. So if we look at the first one, so this is Kim Woo Jin in this first example. So if we draw some lines on here to see the expansion, if you watch the head and the body, and then we can put maybe another line there just at the back of the head. So during the expansion you shouldn't see a big movement of the head backwards or body moving forwards, that kind of thing. And as we see here, coming in, so coming in now, and then now this part is where the expansion is happening. So the archers come into full draw, and then now the expansion is happening. Can you see any movement? And you can see there's hardly any movement. There's actually a tiny bit of forward movement, it looks like, in this video. You can see the gap between the head and the line. But in this example, that's actually just caused by the camera was handheld, which isn't ideal, but the camera was handheld and that was just moving slightly. And you can see that because things in the background move as well. Whereas in the body, the shape of the body is not changing at all in the expansion. It's a really, really good expansion. So if we clear that, and then we move on to the next archer. So this is Lee Woo Suk. And we come up to the same point, and let's draw the lines again. So let's go with the body, and then the head, and then the back of the head again. So coming in, and then now this is where the expansion is happening again. See if there's any movement. Hardly any movement at all. You can't see hardly any movement. Again, see the stability here from expansions happening. Hardly any movement at all. What I'm showing you probably looks like I'm not really showing you anything, and that's the point. You can't see hardly anything. Now, finally, we get to another great archer, Im Dong-yun, and get to the expansion. And again, lines on. I'm not going to bother with the back line this time because, so here you can see that, that is the movement of the camera, obviously. And then what we can see with the expansion is this part. Is there any movement of the archer? No, there's hardly any at all. A great way, if you're looking at a video of yourself doing this, a great way you can look at this is by just scrubbing backwards and forwards really fast, the expansion point. So, here the archer's coming in and then shoots there. So if you just move forwards and backwards to this point, if you just kind of scrub forwards and backwards like that, if you see a big amount of movement, kind of movement forwards, movement backwards, big movement of the elbow, something like that, then maybe the expansion's too large. So now I'll show you an example. So these were all excellent examples, obviously. These are world-class archers. Now I'll show you a small example of some movement. So this is an archer I did a video on previously, which I should say, as I said in that video, the technique is excellent, but there is a slight movement on expansion. So see if you can spot this. So the archer's coming in obviously here, and then there's a slight movement of the head as the archer finds the full draw anchor, and then that's the release there. But let's see if you can see any movement. So if we put the lines on, movement of the head or movement of the body. Let's see that there. So can you see that movement there? And I'll zoom in a bit so you can see a bit more. See that amount of movement. So that is effectively expanding through the clicker. That movement there is happening, and you can see the head moving past the lines. And it's very clear there's a movement. Again, if we do this kind of scrubbing that I did before, previously when I moved the line of the video, you couldn't see hardly any movement of the head. Now if I do it in this video, you can see there's a definite movement here, and that's in the expansion. So I know it looked like I didn't show you anything on the previous videos because I was moving the timeline and nothing was happening on the video. That's because the expansion was really, really good. In this video, the expansion is still really good, but it's not quite world class where those other archers were. So this is the difference here. This is what I wanted to show you in terms of what it should look like and then what you're looking for in your video. So if you then take a video at home, you're working on your expansion, then if you can see some visible movement happening with your body, posture change, maybe you can see kind of a big movement of your bow side like that, or a big movement that way, something like that, that means it's too big and the expansion isn't as good as it could be yet. Now let's see another archer. So this one is myself. And again, this is to demonstrate some slight movement. So I was shooting actually pretty decent here in terms of grouping. I was quite happy, but I wanted to take some videos, and then this is one of the things I looked at when I noticed the video, is the expansion. So when I come up and there's the release. So you probably didn't see much there in terms of when you play through slowly, you can obviously miss some of the expansion parts. Now if we draw the lines again, so apologies, that line's a bit off. Let's have that line there. It's a bit wonky again. I'm not great at drawing these lines, but this should be enough. It doesn't matter if the line's a bit angled because we're looking at the position relative to it. But now watch. So that's pretty much on release there. Now watch this part. So see, there's a bit of movement of the camera which makes it harder to see. But during the expansion, see that bit. So they're coming in, and there's this movement on the front side. There's kind of this stretching out on the front side. So I don't know how obvious that is to see, but you can see that the nose is moving closer to this line, and almost the bow shoulder is stretching out. I appreciate this one's a little bit more fine to see, but it's definitely there again. Perhaps if I clear the lines, maybe you'll be able to see there. So again, in terms of the amount that this is a good kind of stepwise comparison I wanted to show you, where you've got like the world class where there's hardly any movement you can see at all, and then the example there that was really good of the other archer, and then this is an intermediate one where there's a bit of movement, it's a little bit harder to see. So these are kind of the stages, and there's different ways you can look at this. Another great way is to look at it from maybe the 6 o'clock angle, like this. So when you do the expansion, obviously we were looking from this way. We also don't want to see any shifting that way or that way. It needs to be rock stable and then just move. And that's another key thing. So basically what I wanted to show you in here is that during the expansion, there shouldn't be hardly any perceptible movement, and the amount to expand through the clicker should be very small. So when you then use the Delay app or you take some video in your training, then use lines like this. You know, this is Coach's Eyes free app, this version that I've got. You can put the lines on and you can draw them on and see if there's any movement, see which way you're going. In this example of myself, the tendency is to go forwards. And what you'll also notice is actually the posture during the shot is a little bit forwards as well. So that tells us that the expansion is going a bit forwards. And the reason for that is because the posture at the start hasn't been fully set and it's a little bit biased to that side. So it's a little bit biased to that side, and then there's a tendency to go even more to that side as well. In this way, the expansion, I'll talk about this in another video, the expansion is really important to make sure the earlier parts of your shot are good, and particularly that you maintain the posture. So that's a clue for the next video coming up on how you work on your expansion, how you improve it. But the key thing here, as a kind of advanced tip, is to make sure the posture is absolutely nailed down. That's the first thing, and then there are also other things that go in with that as well. So I hope you found that video on the expansion and what you're looking for useful. As always, be sure to smash that like button, and if you've not subscribed already, there'll be a kind of floating subscribe button here, and also another video that you might find useful appearing here if you want to watch that as well. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.